Okay, here we go. Stand by. 3, 2, 1, action.
Assume nothing.
Brash, bald-faced blasphemy.
Question everything.
I find it extremely hard to imagine.
Open your eyes.
It is quite all right to be an atheist.
The fastest growing group of people in the country has been measured as being those who have no belief or who are atheists.
You don't have to be apologetic or quiet about it.
Challenge the opposition.
You see religion on 100 fronts losing the argument.
And start thinking. This is The Thinking Atheist Worldwide.
I'm doing the show here in my home office. And it's a wild kingdom in here. It's a wild kingdom, for Pete's sake. I was in Canada 10 days ago for the Imagine No Religion 2 conference. And I was amazed at how many people came up to me and said, "How's the dog? How's the dog?" Little rat toy Yorkie that has stolen my heart and quite often does the show either at my feet or in my lap. 3 pounds of dog, if you can call it a dog. Well, I've always been an animal guy, so we had a cat passed away, right? And I wanted a cat. Waited a few months. Went by the pet store. Saw this cat in a glass cage. Probably 3 feet tall, 4 feet wide. They wanted a whole lot of too much money for it. You know what I'm saying? With all the animals out there in shelters. Hell no, I'm not paying that for a... Are you kidding me? It's a cat. So we look around. We go to the pound. We went to the shelter, Humane Society, went to other pet stores, and kept going back to this one little pet shop to visit the cat, just to check, see if he was still there. I kid you not, twice a week. For 2 months. Twice a week. They knew us by name. They knew us by face. They would just go get him out. Hey! Oh, he's been lonely today. You know, they're totally working me. The cat just melts into your shoulders and purrs. Does that thing with the paws where they're needy, you know, they kind of kneading your, and the eyes close halfway, and the ears kind of go back just a little bit flat, like, ah, yeah. You know, cats kind of smile. You know that? Know what I'm talking about? Hell no, I'm not paying that for a cat. I kept leaving, kept coming back. Kept leaving, kept coming back. 2 months later, I don't know how many places we'd visited, and they say that your pets choose you. You know what I'm saying? That's a fact, man. This cat chose us, and apparently had spent like 6 months. I mean, it wasn't a kitten. It was less than a year old, but it had spent, I don't know how many months, 6, 7 months in this glass cage. I'll get to the topic on hand here in just a second. I'm just talking. I missed you guys, and I just want to share my story. So I'm like, I can't leave this animal here any longer. It's gonna be here forever. Grabbed the manager, gave him our sad faces, promised we'd give the cat a loving home, blah, blah, blah. Got a discount, brought him home. And his name is Cat, but we spell it with a K. We couldn't come up with a name. And he's been around here for a couple of months now, and he is living the life of Riley. We bought him a little cat tower, and he's got the kitty toys, and he's got the catnip. So anyway, so I've got the dog and the cat. I mean, they're just right here laid out at my feet. Just looking up at me like they own me. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I'm the one who feeds them. I'm the one who takes care of their basic necessities. But they sort of are conscious of the fact that they own me. They own me. They are the master. So as I do the show on why people started to believe, I've got a rat dog at my feet. And right next, probably 6 inches from him, is a little, not so little actually, white Persian blue-eyed cat named Cat going... I don't know if you can hear it. He kicks it on at random. Sounds like a V8. You know, it's like somebody started a Dodge or something, you know? Freaking Ellie Mae Clampett, that's what I am. And if you are under the age of 30, you probably have no idea what that pop culture reference is all about. I'm glad you're here, glad you're listening. Thanks for spending the evening with me. I'm a believer of a lot of years. And one question I hear a lot, people send me emails and think, I got one, I think just yesterday, going, I don't understand it. I don't understand. How could somebody buy all this crap? How does somebody believe in a floating, invisible deity? Believe in the story of Noah packing, anacondas and the duck-billed platypus and polar bears and crocodiles and all manner of critter and creature onto the ark at the age of 600 years old. How does somebody believe that? How does someone believe stories about a guy who was whisked off into heaven in a chariot that was covered in flames as God called him home? No, he didn't die a natural death. No, he was called directly to home by Yahweh. Curses. People who lived to be almost a millennium. People who gained superpowers from the length of their hair. Men who disobeyed the invisible floating deity, and as a consequence were swallowed up by a big fish and lived in the digestive system of that fish underwater for 72 hours. How did you believe that? What's wrong with you? Are you stupid? These are conversations I sometimes have with myself. Religions are great at embracing nonsense, their own proprietary nonsense, and then mocking the nonsense of others. Those of you who are religious know exactly what I'm talking about, don't you? Hell, I heard a family member just a few weeks ago, hugely devout believer in the Christian God and the Christian scriptures, and the subject of Mitt Romney and Mormonism came up. Mitt Romney is a presidential candidate for the 2012 U.S. presidential election. And, of course, his religion is a big topic, and it should be. And, Mormons, they believe some crazy stuff. Do you understand what their doctrines are? It's the most stupid, unbelievable thing you ever heard. I can't believe somebody'd swallow that. Oh, that's terrible. Meanwhile, they're thumping their Bible and praise Jesus. How did that happen? The Mormons are looking over here at the Jehovah's Witnesses, probably, and the Jehovah's Witnesses are looking over here at the Catholics. The Catholics are looking over here at the Muslims, and the Muslims are looking at everybody else, and everybody's going, my ridiculous mythological belief system is correct and sensible, and everybody else, well, they're just full of crap. You know what I'm saying? How does that happen? How do we not make the correlation between our nonsense and the nonsense of others? Because they sort of all relate, right? There's an omnipotent, omniscient deity. There's a holy book or some holy writings somewhere, instructions for living. For the Christian faith, it's the Bible, the Bible. They call it the basic instructions before leaving Earth. Somebody came up with that little... I just thought it was catchy. They believe in a posthumous existence. There is a life after death, whether it's nirvana or heaven or paradise or whatever you want to call it. There's a charge quite often to go out and change the minds of the deceived and the unenlightened, right? Go out and spread the good news. Most religions have that. They want to spread, almost like, say, a virus. Like a virus of the mind. Richard Dawkins has a great quote on the richarddawkins.net website. It says, like computer viruses, successful mind viruses will tend to be hard for their victims to detect. If you are the victim of one, the chances are that you won't know it, and may even vigorously deny it. He also said in an unrelated quote, no doubt soaring cathedrals, stirring music, moving stories, and parables help a bit, but by far the most important variable determining your religion is the accident of birth. Which is why now, as a non-believer, and as someone who does a lot of work, sort of not really on the forefront, but I'm obviously out a little further than I was when it comes to atheism, and I encounter a believer. Obviously, they are desperate to win the day. They're desperate to either make me look like a fool or convert and save me. And the first questions I ask are, where were you born and what was the religion of your parents? It's the first thing I ask. Sometimes I'll mask them. I'll actually sort of make them a little more conversational so they're not quite so obvious. Really, where are you from? Is that your hometown? Where were you born? Oh, that's cool. Yeah. So were you raised in a religious family? Well, really? What was their religion? Were they Baptist, Catholic? What? Pentecostal? What? That's interesting. Ask a couple of questions. And with very few exceptions, you will find that people who are religious are born and assume the religion of their geography and culture and of their mother and father, or both. It's amazing to see the parallel. Right here in the Midwest, it's all about, well, we got Baptists out the yin-yang here, and they call them non-denominational, but they're Assembly of God, Protestant Christianity. Other parts of the nation, it's Catholicism, or you're Lutheran, or you're Methodist. We have some Methodists here. We have like 2 Catholic churches in the whole city. Down in Mexico, Catholicism everywhere. It's you can pinpoint it with geography. Middle East, guess which religion it is. Of course, it's going to be Islam. You're in China. How about the Eastern religions? Hello? I look back and I think now, who was I talking to? Was it Jerry DeWitt or I can't remember who I had the conversation with, but I was thinking, I see my world so much more differently now. You know, there was a time, just a decade ago, when the idea of saying, I am not a Christian, I do not believe in any God, was impossible to me. In my mind, I was convinced I would rather die a physical death. You know, they talk about, if you deny me here on earth, I will deny you in heaven. So people would, posit that. Well, if you were ever in a position where you had to deny God, would you be willing to sacrifice your physical life? And, part of this thought in our minds, yeah, wow, I could never deny God. I could never deny God. I could never deny God. I could never deny God ever. I saw missions work as something necessary, needed, positive. I saw the encouragement given by the church as something that benefited people and, if nothing else, made them feel better. I saw Christian schools as a haven against all the secular influences in the world, a place where young people could go and be protected, which is crap, by the way. Now, in the year 2012, I look back, my whole perspective has changed. My whole perspective has changed. I tell you, every time I drive by and I see a full church parking lot, I don't feel like, wow, a bunch of people are in there feeling better about themselves and having community and doing good things. I honestly get a sinking feeling in the pit of my stomach, and I think, I came from that. How many of those people are just like me? You go along to get along, you inherit your belief system, you don't rock the boat. Certainly in a religious community, you don't rock the boat. You get to feel morally superior, you get to feel happy about your life, and you get to feel like you're a good parent when you send your little urchin children off to Sunday school so that they can have their young skulls filled with all this tripe. I think about everything differently. I get angrier faster because of it. I see almost every situation differently. Abortion, I don't like abortion. But I see the entire problem differently now. Stem cells? The church has no idea what they're talking about. Trust me. Now I see stem cell research for what it is and what it might be, and I'm amazed and astounded by the possibilities that we are alive to see these things happen. But just a few years ago, no way. I just checked out. Did I discover what it was, what it did, anything like that? Did I seek out knowledge? No. They're killing babies. We're harvesting human beings in the name of convenience, people. I look at myself a few years ago, and I want to just reach back in time and grab me by the shoulders and just shake. Wake up. What's the matter with you? Why did I believe? Well, those familiar with how childhood indoctrination works know exactly how it starts. Now, there are some examples of young people where it did not take. But there were a whole lot more examples where young, impressionable, trusting children receive truth, capital T, truth, from their parents. They are isolated from contrary opinions and opposing viewpoints. And before you know it, the die is cast. And your life is in motion. Bam, you're going. Hell, I was on stage as a Youth for Christ spokesperson before I could even drive. 14, I think. What did I know about the world at 14? I'm standing on stages in front of hundreds of people, clean cut, suit and tie, talking about the young generation and how we need to rescue it for Christ. What the hell did I know about the world? Leading chapel services in my school. It just steamrolls before you know it. My first Christian radio job in 1990 and almost 12 years. Just immersed in it. In the deep end, man. In the deep end. Never considered coming out. Never considered it. And that's a recurring theme. I hear it a lot from people. I would have never thought this would happen to me. Brian sent me a letter. He said this. He said, I was raised a Christian, Free Will Baptist in South Carolina. But my family had stopped going to church during my teen years because the church closed its doors and my parents didn't seek out another. Later on in my teen years, I started to wonder whether the Bible was true or not. We'd stopped worshiping God now for years, which seemed to have no discernible difference on our lives. I started reading the Bible in Genesis, and it seemed unbelievable. I almost gave up and became an atheist then, but I discovered apologetic works from people like Josh McDowell, and here's where my ignorance allowed their poor arguments to make a believer out of me. I'll quickly enumerate just what went wrong, Brian says. Number one, first I thought Christians wouldn't lie. It's a damnable sin, after all. Who would risk it? I've since learned that they not only will, but do lie, and on a constant basis. Had I realized this sooner, I think I would have been an atheist much sooner. Second, I thought I had to choose either Christianity or evolution. I didn't know enough about evolution, and Christianity's misinformation about it certainly didn't help. My ignorance of evolution was a strike in Christianity's favor. But it shouldn't have been. Once I realized I didn't have to choose anything, it was okay just to say, I don't know. And I don't have to believe just to have something to believe in. I was then free to evaluate Christianity without this false dilemma. Third, I fell for arguments which seemed like common sense at the time, such as the apostles wouldn't die for a lie, and the fine-tuning of the universe, and something can't come from nothing. In my ignorance, I didn't know there have been many non-Christian martyrs throughout the years, nor how weak the evidence is for knowing just what happened to the apostles, or if they even existed. I added that. Their arguments relied exclusively on my ignorance in every case. Lastly, I can't stress just how much ignorance and false trust held me captive to the lunacy of Christianity. It took years before I could break the spell, during which I was a teacher, writer, and leader in the church. In the end, it was finding the source of my ignorance and becoming informed which broke the spell. I was practically a lay scholar during this time, writing articles on eschatology, soteriology, ecclesiology, early Christian history, and biblical interpretation. It was actually during the writing of a book on biblical interpretation that I threw down my pen and said it out loud. The only reason we need these interpretational methodologies is to cover up the contradictions in the Bible. And that was the day I knew I was an atheist. This is my obviously simplified story of my initial belief and subsequent deconversion decades later. Thanks for listening, Brian. Brian, thank you so much for sharing your story. 630, you're on the Thinking Atheist podcast. Who's this?
This is Drew from Chicago. How are you, Seth?
I'm doing well, Drew. What's going on? What do you have for us?
Well, I was raised Lutheran, but we were not very devout. I was baptized. I was confirmed and all that, but my parents, who've since divorced, have had very differing, religious backgrounds. My father went to church every Sunday of his life until the age of 18. My mother went for a very short period of time as a little girl until my grandmother just said, all right, that's it, we're not going anymore. And I had no reason not to believe. And it wasn't until I was a teenager that I realized, hey, maybe the Bible is crap. Because I was watching some movie, and I don't know if you've heard about this, but there's some scholars that think that, when Moses was walking on the water actually meant walking by the water.
Yeah, well, if you're speaking about Jesus Christ, the one I actually heard was there were underwater trees. Perhaps he was trotting on the underwater trees. Did you believe it when you heard it? He was walking by the water? What was your position at the time?
Well, I was sort of like, oh, well, maybe the Bible has some, mistranslations in it. But, I still believed. And I started hearing that, the Bible condemned homosexuality. It was like, oh, well, maybe, it was a different time. I actually took a course on sexuality and Christianity that kind of got me thinking about all these things, and it was just like, oh, no, hey, wait a minute, this just doesn't gel.
That was the kicker for you. You finally decided enough, huh?
Well, I was talking to my mom about it one day, and she knows that I'm skeptical about religion. And she was like, oh, well, I don't really mind that you don't believe in God, but I don't know why you would want to call yourself an atheist. I'm like, Mom, that's what an atheist is. An atheist is somebody who doesn't believe in God. It's kind of like Richard Dawkins was talking about Julia Sweeney. She was talking about how her mother called her up and said, I don't mind if you don't believe in God, but why are you an atheist?
Definitely carries a stigma. Well, thanks for sharing your perspective on the show. Much appreciated.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Take it easy. 806, thanks for your patience on hold. You're on the Thinking Atheist podcast. Who's this?
This is Nick from Amarillo.
Nick, thanks for calling. I can barely hear you. What's going on?
Well, I wasn't really indoctrinated into religion or anything like that until I was about 6 or 7 years old, and my parents decided that they were going to start doing the whole church thing to save their relationship, and so that's how I kind of got introduced into it. And I think Doug Stanhope probably quoted it the best. I mean, they pump it into your head when you've got that soft spot and you're Santa Claus eligible, and they cork it in there with a bunch of fear, and then your logical side of your brain just kind of grows around it like a club foot, you know. So I think I was kind of fortunate in the fact that I didn't have to do it from, I guess, a very early age. I mean, I could kind of start to see through some of the stuff, like the preacher going up there and preaching how nobody needed anything, material possessions and all that, while he was jingling the change in his pockets, and him and his wife were both driving brand new Cadillacs. So, I mean, I pretty much knew at a pretty early age that there was something wrong there, you know.
I hear a young voice in the background. Who's that?
That's my 4-year-old baby girl, Jada.
Well, give Jada a big hug from us, okay? And thanks for calling the podcast tonight. Much appreciated.
Thanks, Seth.
Take it easy. Jada, that's a pretty name. 480, thanks for your patience on hold. You're on the Thinking Atheist podcast. Who's this?
Hi, Seth. This is Terry.
Hey, Terry, what's up? What's going on?
I listen to your show just about all the time, and this one came up. Why did you believe it? I have a similar story to you, not the same, but was spiritual till my 40s, and the internet woke me up.
All right, talk to me about spiritual. Were you not religious, but you were spiritual? Did you not attend church, but you believed in God? Give me some details.
Catholic family, Italian Catholic, East Coast, whole family's still Catholic, except for me and my free-thinking children, which kind of is, you were saying, you're usually the religion of your parents, so I'm kind of guilty of that with my kids. They're all free-thinkers, too. Was forced to confirm at 14. I don't know if you know about confirmation in the Catholic Church. I didn't really believe, and I didn't want to confirm that I was going to be Catholic for the rest of my life at the age of 14. And I was told that I had to. It was too bad, and I had to do it.
Well, that'll cause you to start resenting your religion or church if you don't really want it and they force it down your throat anyway. That's pretty tough stuff. But you went through with it, huh?
Well, I played bass in the church band to deal with the boredom. And of the weekly masses I was forced to go to. And as soon as I drove, I would say I was going to church, and I would, go do something else for an hour and come back. And when I was out of the house, I just didn't go. But I felt like I wanted to be some religion, and I stumbled into Buddhism, so I was kind of, which is like the atheist religion. But this is all back in the 80s. I'm your age, a couple years older than you. Back then, when we were growing up, you and I, there was no internet. Like, I was just living in this Catholic world. There was nothing else. I didn't know any better. But the red flag went up when I learned about Greek mythology and all those mythological Mount Olympus and all that. I'm like, wait a minute. What we're doing isn't anything different than what those people were doing. So the red flag went up. But I was going to say, the title caught me, Why Did You Believe? And I see what you wrote. Were you indoctrinated? Were you convinced? When you were vulnerable, were you deceived, were you weak-minded, were you insane? All of the above, it's all working, together. When I learned about Greek mythology, I just rationalized it.
Do you look back, though, now? Do you look back and go, what was wrong with me? Do you ever do that to yourself? What was I thinking?
I do, but at the same time, I was always going to tell you, I counted the hits. I counted all the hits, and I ignored all the misses. But when I looked at it objectively, I was counting, and there were a lot more misses than there were hits. Like, you only count the prayers that were answered, the times that things went good in your life. And what woke me up was the internet. And I stumbled upon God as imaginary while I was writing a religious book. And it just woke me up, and I decided to do a little experiment and see what would happen if I stopped being spiritual and praying. I was a real new ager, real into like psychic spirit guides and the universe and manifesting your own destiny and all that stuff.
You were just sampling at the religious buffet, weren't you? Just sort of trying to find one that stuck.
Exactly. And in this one moment, I just remember it vividly thinking, I'm going to just cease and desist. I'm going to see what happens to me if I stop praying, if I stop being spiritual, I just let go of it all. And I decided to do it for a couple days. Then I decided to do it for a couple more days. And nothing happened. My life didn't get worse. My life didn't get better. It stayed the same. And that, to me, quote-unquote, proved that what I had been doing before was ridiculous. And years went by, and I kept telling myself and people, hey, I did this thing, and nothing happened, and nothing happened. After about 2 years, things started happening. My life got better because instead of spending any amount of time praying and thinking and meditating and all that kind of stuff, I was actually doing stuff for real. And my life started to get better for real because I gave that all up and I focused on reality. And yeah, look back and go, I wasted all those years. Where would I be now if I wasn't lost in the clouds, thinking that there was somebody up there looking out for me and working all this magic in my life?
Sure made you feel good, but at the end of the day, what did we really accomplish with all the prayer meetings and the prayer chains and the prayers in the hospital lobbies? And I understand wanting to be by someone's side and wanting to say the words of comfort and wanting to contribute in a positive way. That's all wonderful. But everything that mattered in that whole scenario was really despite the prayer, not because of it. And you're living a much happier, more fulfilled life now, correct?
Absolutely. And then you want to go out and tell the whole world, like I understand these people who want to evangelize because I want to do the same thing. Like, yeah, you live this way. It's so much better. But I think if people have to do it on their own, and I think there's a lot to be said for willful ignorance. That information is out there. People only go and read what they want to read and confirms what they already believe, and they don't ever try to challenge it.
I hear you. Trust me, I hear it all the time, every day. Read this book, listen to this sermon. Let me tell you about my personal experience where I had goosebumps and felt a presence in the room. I actually did a section on this in my speech in Canada, and I'm going to do a version of it in Oklahoma on the 23rd of this month at the Oklahoma Free Thought Convention, where we walk through the old, tired, hackneyed arguments that the internet has helped us put to rest long ago, and yet they continue to raise up and they're like the gnat. You just keep swatting at it, and it just doesn't go away. Go away.
I've told some people about God is imaginary, and nobody will read it. They'll go on there for a minute. Oh, I don't want to see that. That's ridiculous. They won't even, spend a half an hour or an hour seeing what would change me. They just, no.
I've tried to get some people to read The God Delusion or Godless by Dan Barker or Jerry Coyne, Why Evolution is True. They are not remotely interested. And, the truth is that I think as the tide continues to swell, the tide for reason and non-belief continues to swell, maybe over the years their own curiosity one day might cause them to think, hey, it's my own idea. I guess I'll crack open a science book and do a little exploration. But, you'll never force someone else, so.
Well, the thing is, people get older, the ego kicks in. And I had someone tell me, I'm not going to say I don't believe after 45 years because I would have been a fool to have lived my life this way if it's not true.
And that would be a tough pill to swallow, wouldn't it?
Well, it was tough for you and I, but you forgive, what has to be said for forgiveness, you got to forgive yourself.
Yeah.
And then if you're a seeker, you look for the answers. You go, yeah, well, this is why I did that. I mean, it wasn't like I was just completely crazy. There were reasons why I believed and why I allowed my mind to be controlled and manipulated. And so, they're afraid to let go. There's that ego that says, I've been doing this all my life. I'm not going to say it's wrong now. But they don't realize the freedom that lies there once they do, and the weight that's lifted off your shoulders.
Well, I honestly believe that many of the greatest champions for free thought in this world are those who escaped from religion. So I'm glad that you're out there and stirring the pot and spreading good ideas, reasonable ideas, and challenging the status quo. There, we need it. We need more of you. So thanks for a great call. Much appreciated.
You're welcome.
Take care of yourself. I think our earlier caller was onto something when he was talking about how when you have an irrational belief, you kind of cloak it, you protect it. You say, you hide it away. You hide it away, You don't let anything touch it or disturb the peace. You just kind of keep it back there in the back. You just kind of tuck it away. It's totally safe, totally isolated. I don't know what drives that. I know that there have been a lot of studies on how and why people believe what they believe. Daniel Dennett had a great quote. I will butcher it, but he had a great quote about the folly of looking back on an entire life and realizing that you had been mistaken. And that would have to be a very difficult pill to swallow. I mean, what if you are a 60, 70, 80-year-old who's lived a devoutly religious life. And I've seen them, those little blue-haired church ladies going to church every Sunday and every Wednesday night and preaching the Bible and doing their thing and raising the kids and the grandkids to believe the Bible. I mean, when they're 70, 80 years old, imagine them looking back and having, let's say they had a realization that I was totally wrong. And for 365 days a year, for 7 decades, I was telling my children and grandchildren, my friends, my associates, my coworkers, everybody I bump into in my life, my entire inner and outer circle, I was telling them bullshit. I mean, part of me thinks you would have to assume a mindset of denial just to cope. I mean, who would want to do it? Who would want to say, oh, new information. I'm delighted to hear it. Hey, let's change everything. I can't wait to send the mass email out to all my friends and family, telling them the good news that I've discovered, that I was totally full of crap for the last 7 decades. And now I want to correct the record and set things straight. I mean, maybe it's happened. Maybe it's happened. Dan Barker was an evangelist, and when he rejected his faith, his parents eventually became atheists. It does happen. Now, I don't know how old they were, but it does happen. But it's got to be rare. I think about, the senior citizens in my life of every shape and size. The ones that are religious, I mean, they have been going to Sunday go-to meeting since they can remember. The idea that they would just walk away, I think they hold on to it. In fact, you find in church services, I found that they would hold on to even the tiniest traditions. I grew up in a little, for a while, when I was dating a girl, we went to a small little country church, suburb of town. It was a little Baptist church, and it was, I went because my girlfriend went. I didn't, whatever. And I liked some people in the youth group, and we had a good time. But there was no middle age, hardly at all. There were hardly any 30s, 40s, 50s. It was either youth and then a smattering of a few middle-aged adults and then a ton of senior citizens, right? It's the kind of church where they're always having funerals because these people are, they kind of croak. And they had the same agenda every Sunday. You'd come in, there'd be an opening hymn, quick introduction, another hymn, welcome to the guest, third hymn, then we do the announcements, then we do a prayer, then we do the offering, let's do special music, and that's when somebody goes up and sings or plays an instrument or something, special music, and then everybody says, amen, 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 and no applause was allowed, and then the pastor would do his message, which ran us directly to noon, not 12:01, not 11:59, but 12 noon. And then they would have the altar call, and they would have the hymn during the altar call, and then he would give the dismissal and the benediction prayer, and everybody would then go and eat at the buffet. Now, we had a youth director who wanted to stir things up. He wanted to do something different. There were a few occasions when people almost came to blows over this. He changed the order of the agenda. He didn't do this hymn, and he didn't do that hymn, and he didn't do this hymn. He was doing a guest preacher thing. He was preaching instead of the senior pastor, who I guess was on sabbatical, and so he came in and he did it his way. You should have seen these old people. Like they had been violated. They wailed, they moaned, they had meetings, they complained, they wrote letters to the board of deacons. They totally messed up the agenda on Sunday service. I like to sing the good old songs. So he gets chastised. Okay? One time, now we had a podium right in the middle of the stage. One time, He was doing a guest. They let him back in. He was doing a guest preacher thing, and it was I think it was like a Sunday night service. Even it wasn't even the Sunday morning service. And he did a monologue as one of the disciples during the crucifixion. And so he came out, and I don't know who he was, John or Paul or whoever it was. He was somebody, and he was witnessing some biblical event. It's mostly just a blur in my mind. What I remember the most is that to do the monologue, he had to have the entire stage. So they took the big white podium with a microphone on it, and he had it taken off the stage and put over here at the side of the room. These old people just about bore children over this. I mean, there were meetings about it. You could hear them bickering in the lobby. I tell you what, they told me to take that podium off the stage. That podium's supposed to be right there in the center of the stage. Got the big Bible in front of it. Very difficult. Now, why did they get tripped up on the pebbles? On the tiny things, on the minutia? You know, it's like the old person that sits around in his retirement years on the front porch of his house and freaks out about, somebody's dog pooped on my lawn, damn it. I mean, he'll talk about it for weeks. You get to the point where anything that upsets the routine, that upsets the norm, that makes you uncomfortable, even the smallest stuff, rattles your cage. Why is that? Well, it's really true with religion. Really true with church. Really true with religious belief. This has been the structure of my life for decade after decade after decade after decade after freaking decade. You think they're going to just throw it out? It's probably happened. Hell, I ought to do a podcast on it down the way. Senior citizens who rejected their faith after the age of 60. Or 65, we'll pick an age, just because I'm curious. Might be a very short show. I don't know. I would love to hear stories of people in their 60s and 70s who came to a moment of critical mass and said, screw it, this is BS. But it's rare. It's at least rare in these circles. People take comfort in knowing what comes next, in the familiar. Knowing that this hymn follows this announcement, follows this message, follows this benediction, follows the Sunday meal. And next Sunday, we'll do it all over again. 617, thanks for your patience on hold. You're on the Thinking Atheist podcast. Who's this?
Hi, this is David from Boston.
Hey, David, thanks for your patience on hold. What's going on?
So I'm a Hispanic, and we're generally Catholic, so I was baptized and so forth. My mother wasn't really... not Catholic to say, but just very spiritual. But there'd be times where, she'd be spiritual and we all go to church. I remember going to Catholic church, and I said, this is a really nice building. It's a very warm building. And we go and we kind of drop out. And then probably around 8, we would go to these big churches, these mega-type churches, and they would have the kids, they would be a gym, and there would be 2 or 3 gyms, and you played basketball and so forth, and there was a puppet stage, and it would have a puppet show, and all these fun games, and we'd play. But there's also that bringing of believe in God, believe in Jesus. And I had to be the one that said, how do you know there's a God? How do you know there's a Jesus? And they said, well, read the Bible. You're telling me to read this book, but I'm asking besides outside this book.
Well, people who quote the Bible to prove the Bible, I always say, I got a copy of the entire Harry Potter series. I'd like to quote it to prove Harry Potter. Or that little poster that's flying around the internet that says, this napkin is true. I know it because it says so written on this napkin. I mean, that's pretty much as basic as that gets. It's amazing how. What point in your life did common sense finally take hold and reason take hold, and you finally busted out officially?
16 is when I came out. But I mean, growing up from maybe say 12 up to 16.
Well, thanks for the call and for being a part of the show today. Very much appreciated.
All right, thank you very much.
Take it easy. Had a letter from Sheila. She said, I was indoctrinated from toddlerhood to believe. I was dragged from Baptist church to Baptist church until I was in my teens and began to rebel. The answers I was given to my questions were never satisfactory. I had to step outside the religion to rewire my brain. It took decades, and it was scary to have to go against my elders, an entire family, to find the truth. I had many doubts as to my intelligence and ability to hold firm. I'm now heading toward 50, and I refuse to let my family attempt to indoctrinate my adult daughter or new grandson. I brought my daughter up without a set religion and instead exposed her to as many cults as I could to show her the ridiculousness of them all. She was given the tools to resist. I will give those same tools to my grandson. Kevin said, "You ask why we used to believe? Well, I've asked myself that many times. Why didn't I ever grow a backbone? And look at the world, what it had to offer when I was younger. Well, like you, I was raised in the church. My dad was a Baptist pastor, and we were at every church function imaginable. At the beginning of my 4th grade year, my parents decided they were going to homeschool me and my brother and sister. They said it was to keep us from bad influences in public and even Christian schools. Now that I'm 31 and I've talked to them about it, I found it was very much a curriculum thing. They didn't want us to hear what was being taught in science class. I was even told that if I didn't go to a parent-approved Bible college for at least 1 year directly out of high school, then they wouldn't help pay for any of my schooling, wouldn't co-sign student loans or anything. So for me, it was a simple matter of total isolation. I really wanted to chime in on your last podcast about homeschooling, but I was working that night. You know, I have to agree with you on your stand that indoctrination and this isolationist view of raising, quote, Christian kids is a form of neglect and abuse. I know that I feel I was robbed of an education which could have sent my life in a totally different direction. The only thing that a parent should try to force down their kids' throats is their vegetables. Kevin, thanks for the message. You know, I don't think all homeschooling is bad. I tried to make that clear during the last podcast when we spoke about it. I did a very poor job because I received hate mail. If you like, how come you're razzing us homeschoolers? And the truth is I do think there are instances when, if they're properly socialized and the conditions are right and they're getting good information and they're working at their own pace, that you can really make it work and work well. My objections largely come from really two fronts. One is the huge one that Kevin was speaking about, and that's the isolation of a child. You know, keeping the child away from any influences. Essentially, you're raising a bubble person, totally unprepared for the real world, totally locked away from any contrary points of view, curiosity quelled. The second thing is that I have concerns about some parents' ability to properly teach, especially certain subjects. You know, some parents are simply not qualified. They're just not going to be able to properly teach trigonometry, calculus, world history. Now, some people bring in, homeschooling doesn't mean that a parent actually has to do the teaching. Some people bring in a tutor, a teacher or something. So, it can be done. But I really want to draw a circle around that before somebody else sends me emails filled with hate and death. Because I really, But I got a problem with people who put their kids in a box. It just drives me freaking crazy. Crazy. Paige sent an email and said, my family was not really religious until I was 8 years old. All of us were christened at birth. Did our first communion. My father was Catholic. My mother wasn't anything. Attended parochial school and attended Mass as a family only for high holy days. When I was 8, my parents got saved, at which point I was at church Sunday morning and evening, as well as Wednesday for Awana. I, too, became saved with my parents. As the years went by, through many moves, church scandals, and family hardship, I continued believing. I never truly embraced the message. I never really prayed during prayer. I never really paid attention to sermons, and I never really wanted to change my, quote, sinful ways. I just thought I was just fine the way I was. A girl who dug classic rock and classical music, who never touched drugs, alcohol, never snuck out, never had a boyfriend. I was a good kid who was constantly told she was bad. My parents homeschooled me in middle and high school as a way to protect me from the world. Here we go again. I was forced to wear long dresses, wasn't allowed to date. I had to go on dates with my dad as a way to usher me into biblical womanhood, whatever the hell that means. It was some nonsense about submitting and not going to college. When I moved out of my parents' house in my late teens, I stopped going to church altogether and never talked about faith. Then a bad relationship went really wrong and my parents bailed me out, at which time I readopted the Christian nonsense as a way to not buck their system. Living with my parents in my early 20s was exactly like living with them in high school, except I was actually supporting myself, paying rent and paying all my own bills at some point. Likely through the influence of university friends who were atheists, I read Dawkins' God, Delusion and started seriously questioning my faith. I finally realized I could no longer profess something, even if only to make my life with my parents comfortable, that I did not believe, but found to be wholly and irrevocably asinine. My belief was always centered around acceptance in my family, not wanting to buck the system, not wanting my borderline personality disorder mother to scream and throw plates at my head, which really did happen. In my mind, I was trapped, and for a long time, I was, because I lived in a small town of 800 people with no license, no vehicle, and almost no way to leave. But really, it was about keeping my parents happy, because a mom who throws stuff at your head and calls you foul names is a pretty solid reason to toe the party line. Once I realized I was really, truly a good person, better than my parents ever gave me credit for, and in spite of my crappy upbringing, I ditched my parents and embraced a philosophy of non-belief. I'm still going through the process of cleaning out all the crap out of my head almost 3 years later, and it creeps in at the oddest times. But I'm so thankful to have ditched the drivel that I never really believed anyway. Thanks for reading, she says. I'm a huge fan of Seth and the Thinking Atheist, and am continually inspired and encouraged. Best wishes from one heathen to another. Paige. And big hugs right back to you. Thanks for a wonderful letter. Back to the switchboard. Let's talk to 270. Hi, you're on the Thinking Atheist podcast. Who's this?
Hey, Seth. It's Josh.
Josh, thanks for calling. What's up?
Well, listening to all this, it reminded me of a conversation that I had with an older gentleman at the Reason rally, just a random passerby that I was sitting down with, and we were talking about some of the Christian protesters that were there. And I said, I went over there and talked to them, and he's like, don't talk to those people. They're too far gone. They won't listen. And I said, well, that's not necessarily true. You got to understand, I used to be one of those people. And had somebody not come and talk to me, I'd still be one of those people. As a former Christian who believed very strongly, the only reason I believed is because nobody had ever challenged it. Nobody ever presented an argument to the contrary. I live in the Bible Belt in western Kentucky, so there's not a lot of diversity. But, had someone come to me and presented me with an argument, I would probably listen, But don't ever look at somebody and think that they're too far gone in their beliefs to be rational, to accept an argument,
Well said. Honestly, those seeds may take years, possibly decades to grow, but it's funny how having the conversation, even if someone's listening from the sidelines, can really make a difference. Hell, it was a debate between Christopher Hitchens and a rabbi that I just, I was watching from a distance that started my own personal journey. I mean, really, really whipped it into motion, and hell, nobody was talking to me, but the discussion was certainly taking place. Wise words. Thanks for calling the show. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
Take it easy. Let's talk to Addison on Skype. You're on the Thinking Atheist podcast. What's up?
Hi, can you hear me okay?
I sure can. What's up?
I was just wondering how people like Alister Mcgrath can still believe when they're obviously highly intelligent.
Well, for those who don't know who Alister Mcgrath is, he's an apologist and he's an author. In fact, he wrote a book called The Dawkins Delusion, which I had someone give to me, right? Because they knew I had read Richard Dawkins' The God Delusion, which had really helped me in my own journey out of superstition. And they gave me a hardback copy of Alister Mcgrath's book, The Dawkins Delusion. And I said, well, what's in it? And they go, I don't know, we didn't read it. Which really tells you what we're up against. They knew it was anti-Dawkins. They didn't know what the book actually said. Why do people like that believe? I think someone like Michael Shermer would be much more qualified to answer the question. He actually has a book out called Why People Believe Weird Things. And he deals with things like why people believe in God, and he lists them out like they have arguments based on the good design or the natural beauty of the world or complexity, and that's enough for them. Or they have a feeling that God is in us, or they find comfort in it. Maybe it makes them feel good and gives their life meaning, right? They have a mission. Maybe it's because of their families and culture. Back to those first two questions. Where were you born? What was the religion of your parents? I think about Francis Collins of the Human Genome. I bring him up all the time, because he honestly helps the atheist movement. He's an evangelical Christian who founded the Human Genome Project. The guy freaking helped to map our genome. He's not a stupid man. He's a very, very, very intelligent guy. But even he can't make his faith jive with the facts, so much so that he had to come forward and say that the Adam and Eve story in the book of Genesis cannot explain the origin of humankind. There would have to have been literally thousands of people on the earth at the moment of creation. Well, congratulations, Collins. You just essentially said that there's no Adam and Eve, there's no original sin, there's no fall of man, there's no need for the flood, there's no need for Christ to come and be sacrificed on the cross. You have essentially negated your entire holy book with one assertion. But why does he believe? Why? It's probably as complex as the people themselves. It has to do with comfort. Maybe it has to do with a feeling of purpose. People feel good. Maybe they cope with the fear of death. I mean, why do you think people like Mcgrath and company believe what they believe? Certainly you have an opinion.
I don't know, because I can see why, you can see why certain people do believe, like, say, your relatives. You can just see why in that person's life they believe. But with Mcgrath, I don't obviously know his background, but I was thinking his understanding of the universe and things like that would actually, just cancel out the religious belief. But it doesn't seem to, and I was just wondering how it could do that in, like, really, really intelligent people.
Did you see the presentation I made at the Oklahoma Free Thought Convention last year where we talked about God glasses?
Yeah.
I know it's something that many people have used a version of that metaphor, but I really do think that people like Mcgrath, and I think he's a true believer. I don't think he's a charlatan. There are many, many, many charlatans out there who I think are lying through their teeth and bilking people out of millions. And
yeah, I phoned you about Psychic Sally.
Yes, yeah. I mean, preying on the weak, preying on the elderly, preying on the vulnerable, preying on the stupid. Those people exist. But I honestly think people like Collins and Mcgrath and their ilk really do. They're true believers. But they started with the conclusion. So now they're looking around at the universe, and whenever they see something that happens to buttress their own opinion, that looks irreversibly complex. And then they write it down in their little diary. You want to facepalm about 25 times? Go to YouTube. There's a debate. It's not really a debate. It's a discussion between Richard Dawkins and Alister Mcgrath. And they're standing here, and they shot it, I think, with one camera. There's one guy, and so every time the next guy would talk, the camera guy has to freaking walk around to the other side. And every time Dawkins would sort of throw a question toward Mcgrath's way, Mcgrath would always start his answer by saying, well, I think you raised some very interesting questions. And so he would challenge him about something else. Well, I think you've raised a very interesting question, one that I would like to explore. Well, that's a very interesting question. And of course, I'm screaming I'm like, answer of course it's an interesting question. Why don't you freaking answer it?
I think that's the same concept.
I think I myself, once I finish, I'm reading Lawrence Krauss's book now, A Universe from Nothing, and I'm rereading The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And once I'm done with those two, I'm going to jump into Shermer's book, The Believing Brain. And because I really would like to go deeper myself to understand how do people compartmentalize? How do they rationalize? How do they justify? How do these crazy beliefs take and why do they stay? And then how do we actually possibly get through so that people can defeat them and live a more reasonable life? So I don't know. Your guess is as good as mine, my friend. Thanks for the call, though. Much appreciated.
No problem, Seth.
Take care of yourself, my friend. 469, thanks for your patience on hold. You are on the Thinking Atheist podcast. What's your name?
Hello, Seth. My name's Christian. I'm from Dallas, Texas.
What's going on, Christian? Glad to meet a free thinker. You are a free thinker in Texas, right?
Yeah,
okay.
Believe it or not, there are free thinkers in Texas. And first of all, I wanted to start off by saying I really do appreciate everything you do for the show, and I'm a big fan. Believe it or not, I think you were one of the very first YouTube atheists that actually introduced me to the whole YouTube atheist category.
Really? Thank you. Thank you.
Anyway, so my story begins, like every Hispanic family, well, a majority of Hispanic families, I grew up Catholic up until the age of 9. It was around the time I was transitioning from, I think, elementary or middle school, whenever my mom found the truth, and the Jehovah's Witnesses, they came knocking at her door, and we started going. And for me, the reason why I sort of was fascinated and I fell for it was that I was a very curious kid. I always found happiness in discovering new things, and they have a lot of publications, Awake, The Watchtower, and they were filled with a lot of information, not necessarily true, but I liked information nonetheless. I was gullible, I was naive. I asked where babies come from, birds and the bees, I believed it. Why is the sky blue? The ocean, I believed it. So I was a Jehovah's Witness for about, I think, 7 years up until I was 16. But during the course, I guess, between 14 and 16, a lot of questions started to come up. I was exposed to biology and, Big Bang and, evolution. And I was challenged in some ways by what they'd explained, because I'd always believed, in the creation story. And then that was exposed to me. But, I asked the elders in the congregation, why is this, why is that? And they'd always tell me, because it's God did it and God does everything. You never question God. Eventually, it got to the point wherever I couldn't just take the answer of God. That wasn't good enough for me. I had to know exactly what happened. So then, when I was 16, a death in the family occurred that shook my faith. It was life-changing, and I was able to see life from a different perspective. I was able to see that I had believed so many lies, and it was actually kind of funny. I went into a room and was asking the elders a question, and in the middle of it, all of a sudden, from the back of my mind, I heard, "It's all bullshit. It's all bullshit." Next thing you know, I became an atheist in the middle of them talking to me.
Can I ask you a question about your culture? Because I know the Hispanic community is hugely Catholic. Are you going to church every time the doors are open? Do you have the Virgin Mary statues in your house and the crucifixes and all that? Or is it something else?
Well, for me, my parents kind of lost a lot of the culture when they moved from Mexico to America. We went to Catholic church mass like maybe 2-3 times a year. We weren't really devout, but, everyone around me, they were very devout. They had the rosaries around their necks, always thanking God whenever they had a chance. But for us, it was, we didn't get serious until the Jehovah's Witnesses came knocking at our doors.
Well, I'd be curious. I may have to go into that culture more in the future. I'm always amazed. Mexico is so devoutly Catholic, But is it ingrained? Is it more of a cultural thing? Do people truly believe it? Or is it just something they invoke to say out loud to give them comfort, to make them happy because they're supposed to? I mean, I'd be curious to go a little deeper. So
yeah, like in Mexico itself, when I went to go visit and, I was atheist. Over there, the word for atheist is Ateo. Whenever I said that, you could hear the crack of thunder and everybody just turned their heads and they looked at me, "Es un ateo," it's an atheist. And they're like, they kind of look at me like I'm the root of all evil, which is kind of the opposite because, I'm still a very conservative guy, but I just don't believe in God anymore. And
El Diablo.
Yeah. La chupacabra, he does it. But It's funny. I was actually, after I, started losing my faith, after I quit, 3 years later, now I'm 19, and I was able to help out in deconverting 3 of my closest friends. I was able to give a girl hope that there are free thinkers in Texas, and right now I'm in college and I'm as curious as ever, wanting to know what it is, everything.
Well, I wasn't razzing on Texas. I'm in Oklahoma, and so I share the same culture that you do, where there's a church on every block, but at the same time, I know that you have people like Matt Dillahunty. He's based in Austin, Texas, for Pete's sake, so he's down there, and so as many mega churches as you guys have, you also have a great free thinking community that's rising with the tide. I appreciate your call. Thanks so much for your perspective. Very much appreciated.
Thank you very much. Hope you have a great night.
You betcha. From Mexico to Germany, a listener named Fernando sent me this message. He said, I can't really speak about my own loss of faith, as it already happened when I was in my early teens. Instead, I'll let you know what I observed with a close relative in the past few months. She was raised a Christian in the 1960s and 70s, Latin America. 20 years ago, she moved to Germany with her family, which restricted her ability to be an active part of the religious community, as she only spoke Spanish and hence could not communicate with other members of the community or participate in service properly. As years passed by, she grew ever more critical of the Catholic Church and never went to church, except for weddings and funerals, etc. After 10 years in Europe, she had completely stopped talking about religion, praying, or participating in religious life. 7 months ago, she became a grandmother for the first time. Mother and father of the newborn were both atheists. 3 months after the birth of the child, she asked during a family meal, "When is the child getting baptized?" I was pretty surprised of her comment, as she didn't have a problem at all with her daughter becoming an atheist. Why would she insist the child be baptized? I asked her why, and her response was, quote, "I believe that no matter what her parents believe, a child needs to be protected," unquote. Digging deeper, I realized that fear was the feeling really responsible for her clinging to Christianity. She basically had abandoned her belief 10 years before. Still, she was uncomfortable with openly admitting her loss of faith. Christianity gave her hope that death is not the end of all things for her, that if anything happened to her, God would wait for her. Maybe it's not fear of hell or any kind of punishment, but rather fear of the uncertain that kept her believing, at least superficially. Fernando, thank you so much for the message. Back to the phones. 403, thanks for your patience. Who's this?
Hi, this is Mitchell from Calgary.
Glad I was just up your way.
I actually listened to one of your podcasts, and I actually heard in Calgary. I was like, oh, damn, I wish at the airport.
70 degrees and sunny skies, and I'll take that, man. It's a beautiful country up there. What's going on?
Well, I've read last week that you're doing a podcast about how did you become converted into religion, and I just wanted to say that I was converted at a young age. I was in Mormon, and every frickin' Sunday I get up at frickin' God knows 10 o'clock. It's so boring there, but if I didn't go, I'd be burned in hell.
You were afraid of hell just for missing church?
Yeah.
Because normally it's if you don't accept Jesus, and then you're supposed to go to church to be fed, because if you're not fed, then you're not properly being discipled.
I lived with them when I was young, and they were uber religious, and it was kind of scary, because if I didn't do this, I'd be burned in hell. If I didn't do that, I'd be burned in hell.
Well, they played the fear card every day then, didn't they? Jeez.
Yeah. And after I grew up a bit, I moved back to Ontario with my parents, and I attended a church there that was Christian. And to be honest, a lot of people might say that Christian is more intense than Mormon, but they're actually a little bit more lenient.
No, I've heard the Mormons are pretty intense. I had some Mormon neighbors. Now, they were wonderful people personally, but their faith was intense. I mean, they'd sent their teenage boy off for his 2-year mission, and they didn't see him. I mean, they were hardcore believers. They married their daughters off early, and they had a busload of children, and they were pretty hardcore. So yeah, I would say if I put for sheer verve, I would put the Mormons up against the Christians pretty much any day of the week.
One of why it was got away from religion was my parents got really sick, and I'd always pray for them all the time, saying, please just help them get better and get better. And what I really noticed that things weren't getting better, they were actually getting really worse. So I thought to myself, God's supposed to be all loving, and he's supposed to help out his followers. Why isn't he helping me out? Why my family getting more sick? And so I started doing a lot more research on this, and turns out you have to be main follower. You can't do anything bad, or else he's not going to help you. I'm like, if he's so loving, why can't he just help out, even though if you do mislead sometimes?
No, they're saying that your prayers are ineffective if you sin at any time?
Yeah, if one sin, too bad, no good, go away.
But you're a sinner, right? You're unworthy. You require the blood of Christ to wash you clean. There's no way you'll possibly be worthy. So how could your prayers be effective in any context? I don't understand.
Exactly. And so I did a lot more research, and my parents finally did get better, but it was the doctors doing, not God. It kind of really does piss me off a lot.
Well, I hear it all the time, and with God glasses on, it doesn't matter what happens. I mean, heaven forbid, pardon the expression, your parents would have been so sick that they had died. Well, God would have called them home. If they had been affected in some permanent physical way in their weakness, God could be strong. He allowed this infirmity to take place so that he could show his victory over adversity. And if they're healed completely, then God is good, God is wonderful. God came and supernaturally restored them physically. Blah, blah, blah. It doesn't matter what happens. They've got something in their back pocket. Religion is ready to play some kind of a God card that happens to fit whatever circumstance you're in. And I hear that a lot. The problem of evil is what they call it, when bad things happen to good people and people start to question. And it sounds like the same scenario was true for you. What age were you when you finally broke free?
It was actually last year. I was 16.
So you're still a teenager.
Yeah. And I actually tried to get on the teenagers talk show, but couldn't get on.
I'll try to do another one down the pike. I had a lot of emails, a lot of calls. I just had no time to get to. I certainly wanted to. I'm so encouraged by young people, by the teenagers and the 20-somethings that I hear from, that send me emails, that call the show, that shake my hand at events and come up and tell me their stories. I am so encouraged. There is a swelling of passion and curiosity and awe and wonder and fearlessness to attack the status quo whenever possible, whenever necessary. That I'm so excited to see what the teenagers and 20-somethings of today will accomplish in the next decade. And you're a part of that. So I wish you the very best. And I thank you for a wonderful call, man.
All right, thank you.
Take it easy. Just about out of time here. I want to thank everybody for being a part of the show. The switchboard still, I'm looking at probably 20 calls that I just don't have time to get to. And I think that tells me that there are a lot more stories to tell. If you were looking to find out more about why and how people believe, there are a lot of resources out there. Probably the number one on my list, obviously, and it's a cliche, but I have to put it at the top. It's Richard Dawkins' book, The God Delusion. And it really does a good job of sort of talking about this weird mindset of acceptance to superstition. David Mills has a book, a wonderful book called Atheist Universe, The Thinking Person's Answer to Christian Fundamentalism. Dan Dennett's Breaking the Spell, obviously. I'm not going to recommend Hitchens. I know God is Not Great is a terrific book, but it's a little bit thick for a first run. And it doesn't really address immediately why people believe. It's more of a challenge to the dogma, but I don't think it really explores the mindset. Sam Harris wrote a great book, a very short, easy read called Letter to a Christian Nation. Came out, I want to say 2008 or 9. I don't know. I picked it up 3 or 4 years ago. Dan Barker tells his story in Losing Faith in Faith. An instrumental book for me was by Charles Templeton. It's called Letting Go of God. There are a lot of wonderful resources out there that I think help to, as you hear the stories of people who were once religious, it gives you a window into their lives and into their minds, and it allows people to better understand, well, how did they get there? Why did they believe it in the first place? How could an intelligent, reasonable person buy all of the nonsense and adhere to it for so long. And I think those books sort of help to unlock that particular code. We have a lot of shows coming up here in the coming weeks. The complete show schedule is on Blog Talk Radio. You can just search for The Thinking Atheist. Don't forget, all of our shows are also downloadable on iTunes and on Zune, and will soon be available on YouTube as well. Have a wonderful week. We'll see you next time.
Follow The Thinking Atheist on Facebook and Twitter. Watch dozens of original videos on the Thinking Atheist YouTube channel. And visit our website for resources, links, contact information, the editor's blog, and more. thethinkingatheist.com.